He must be one of the busiest journalists in the world. His name is Nick McKenzie. You would have seen him on Channel 9, 60 Minutes. You may have read him in The Age or the Sydney Morning Herald. I am enormously proud of the Walkley Award. I have it in a prominent place at home. But this guy, Nick McKenzie, he hasn't got one Walkley. He has got 16. What do you do? Where do you put them?
Yeah, they sit in the cupboard. So we don't do, journalists don't do we do it to help people and to make the world a better place, as idealistic as that sounds. So that's
I think it is just wonderful. You deserve the credits and the tributes that you've obviously got. I don't think there's anyone in Australia who's won 16 Walkley Awards, is there? Don't be modest.
I couldn't answer that. But, anyway, I think one thing that makes me and my team stick out is we're one of the few investigative journalism teams that does deep dives in Australia. That's really been cut back recently because of all the financial pressures, etc., that face the industry. And so that's the unique thing about us. We do look at politicians. We take on organised crime. We take on corrupt business people, and that makes us a bit different.
Well, as long as we've got you, we don't need any others because you seem to be very good at it. Let me ask you if you have any fears for your safety, because some of these people in the CFMEU look pretty intimidating, threatening. Are you taking good care of yourself?
Well, some of them look like they're bikies, and some of them are bikies. So, yeah, of course, it's a concern, and you do what you can to take care of yourself, but it is a shadow at the moment, and I guess I'm looking over my back. But I'm also knowing there's a lot of good, honest unionists out there who do have my back, and they're in the majority, and they don't like the bikies and the crooks and the corruption. So while they're running around, I feel okay.
Now let me take you back and ask you this: how long on this story? I think it is fantastic that you've done this. I just love the people running around with the Sergeant Schultz defence saying, I know nothing. How long have you been working on this story?
Well, we've been working on this specific story for 9 months, but a lot longer than that. The first time we looked at the CFMEU, I looked at the CFMEU and corruption and the building industry was back in 2008. In Victoria, and some of the same characters. Your Mick Gattos, your John Setkers were around back then, up to the tricks they're up to now. I think what that tells us is the systems of reform too. We've had regulatory agencies, we've had efforts at change. They have failed largely, and over the last 18 months, the industry's become more corrupt than it ever has in the past, and that's the real concern.
Is it beyond help, beyond redemption?
No, I think the significant by the federal government, state governments this week, they go, if they're properly executed with appropriate powers, and if you have an administrator come and clean shop at the CFMEU, then I think things will change. And I think, but it's all about whether that the people they get to clean up are proper credibility and have the guts and resourcing to clean up, and that's an open question.
Nick, with the unions, obviously that's anyone who born in the 50s and 60s would recognise the name Gallagher, Norm Gallagher from Victoria, and it spawned from in the early days and kept on going. But we have a fear about unions in terms of corruption. But what about institutional organisations that are recognised to be do-gooders that may in fact not be much do-gooders? I'm not casting dispersions necessarily on Slater and Gordon, but there's a bit of a checkered history. Slater and Gordon and unions, Australian Workers' Union, a whole heap of issues, and now they've been pinged for underpaying. What's your view about these sort of institutional organisations?
Listen, I wouldn't have a crack at Slater and Gordon. I think the real issue is the big building companies. You can't get a union official copying a kickback without a building company prepared to pay it. Yeah. So there's two sides of that equation. And I think the other issue, the Labor Party's known what's been going on, and they've empowered the CFMEU can host corruption because it has industrial muscle. It has industrial and political muscle because it has mates in the ALP who support it. So I think for me, it's those building companies, the corporate side of things, that you've got to hold them to account. Politicians who've turned a blind eye or enabled this poor behaviour.
Isn't the problem that the trade union movement own the Labor Party and feel quite correctly that they can call the shots?
There's an element of that. I don't think it's as simple as that. The trade union movement, the unions have certain voting rights within Labor, and they've used those powers to shape policy and to get certain people into Parliament. But Labor's gone some way to sort of stripping that back. And this week, Labor's now saying, right, CFMEU, you're out of the ALP, at least for the time being, until you clean up house. And so Labor they're not doing nothing. They are seeking to cut those ties. But the point you make is also valid. Those ties are deep and long-standing, and they've led to some pretty average outcomes.
And they've said, well, we're not going to take money from the CFMEU construction unit or construction division. Well, it's so big, they just put the money through a different division.
Well, that's not right. The CFMEU has like a manufacturing division. It's a manufacturing division that's actually been agitating for reform and change. They're the anti-corruption heroes in this. And that reminds us that the union movement itself, it's mostly made up of good people having a crack for work. The bloke we interviewed on 60 Minutes, Leo Skumdubis, is the manufacturing CFMEU union boss. He's the one calling for change. He's demanding reform. These guys are the heroes of this story, and they're not the corporates, they're the trade unionists.
Well, we've got Fair Work Australia, we've got Conciliation and Arbitration Commission, but we've got ICACs and we've got IBACs, we've got the Ombudsman, we've got the Federal Police. I mean, they couldn't all have been asleep at the wheel, Nick.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I think a lot of them were asleep at the wheel. Police don't want to do it. It's too difficult, too expensive, too time-consuming. Even when they charge your union bosses, Greenfield, the current state secretary of the CFMEU, they don't stand aside. And Darren Greenfield just hangs on to his key union leadership position despite facing serious corruption charges. In what world does that happen? And so the police then lose a bit of internal guts to say, well, what's the problem? Let's handball it to the Fair Work Commission or handball it back to the police.
Well, thank God you're there. Tell me the story about John Setka and that episode where he was nationally humiliated because of his domestic violence history. You've got some emails, I believe.
Well, we know Setka's a bit of a standover bully, and in 2019 it was exposed that he was standing over a woman, his estranged wife, and he was ultimately convicted for domestic violence-related offences. Most conduct in respect of his ex-wife. Yeah. What we've exposed today is that even as this domestic violence case was swirling, and even as the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese moved to expel him from the ALP because of that domestic violence conduct, there were Labor Party insiders behind the scenes texting Setka and offering him support. I think it just shows that's gross political hypocrisy here. You've got the leader of the ALP on the one hand publicly calling for Setka's expulsion, and indeed expelling him, and at the same time Labor politicians saying to Setka, that's pretty ugly.
Oh, very embarrassing. Did they imagine that such emails would not be leaked?
They were text messages, and I'm sure they thought they would never be leaked.
How did you get them?
I'm not going to say.
This story to come, Nick?
Yeah, we've kicked a real hornet's nest, so we'll keep digging. And there'll be much more to come. And I think until there's a clean-up, we'll stay on the case.
Are you getting new material because of the publicity that this story...
Every day of the week we get more tip-offs, etc. So it's really quite amazing.
How big is your staff? It will be very costly in terms of not only dollars, but manpower and time to follow everything up.
Well, there's basically three of us, 3 journos, myself and 2 colleagues digging away, so it's tiny. But, we're committed, and luckily we're supported by many people in the public who've got stories to tell and information to share. And
you're also supported by the management. I mean, the 9 what do they call themselves now? Nine Radio or Nine Network? Because you've got 3AW and 4BC and...
yes.
So
they own the papers. Nine owns The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Financial Review, and of course, Six companies right behind good journalism.
And they are prepared to stand by you and take the heat if there is heat. Well, obviously, if you kick a hornet's nest like this, there are going to be a hell of a lot of hornets running around, and these people don't stop at just trying to shut you up. They'd be onto management quick smart, I would think.
Absolutely, they are. So we've got a company that does believe in journalism, and it's critical to have that support if you're going to do this pretty intensive, expensive work.
Has the Prime Minister handled this well, or has the Victorian government handled it well?
I think in the cases of both the Victorian and the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, it's a start, and they're promising reform. But we've got to keep the blowtorch on to make sure they really do follow through.
It's hardly credible for Jacinta Allen to say that she had never heard anything about this. I mean, we know, I think, that at least a year ago, but probably logically a lot longer than that, she knew about it.
Yes, she definitely did know about aspects of this, and I think she failed to take the requisite action. And now she's being held politically accountable for that. There is a huge debate in Victoria about what the Premier knew and when, and why she didn't do more until it really hit the press. It's a really important part of this story to make sure those politicians who fail to do their jobs, to keep these big state government contracts, projects away from the Reuters and the corrupt. I think we've got to hold those politicians to account.
Nick, it's wonderful to talk to you again. Congratulations again on the work. I'm sure the Walkley people are going to have to figure out some way of handicapping.
Thanks for it.
Well, our wonderful country, Australia, of course, can't let people run on their own merits. I mean, they have to put lead in their saddlebags somehow. So watch it. No bombs under the car and no lead in the saddlebags.
There must be an awful lot of brass, so you need to keep those polished.
Yeah. What are you working on next? No, you can't tell me.
Can't say too much. Just keep your eyes on
Well, more strength to your arm. Keep it up. Wonderful work.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
All the best. Nick McKenzie. Now, if that guy isn't the best journalist in the country, he's our version of Bernstein and Woodward. And Catherine Graham, the Age people, they'd have a sort of a Catherine Graham kind of character who stood there and when the White House rang and said, "Shut these journalists up! This is embarrassing me."
I reckon he's a bit of a cape.
Yeah.
A do-gooder and clean out the cupboard type of thing.
And he's good on television. He's you don't often find good print journalists who are good on television as well.
Yeah, both. Covers all bases very well.
Yeah, no, he's a find.